Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Nobody Asked Me Guys show. Guys, we have a great show for you tonight. We're going to be talking to none other than attorney Jerome Reide of the NAACP. Well, actually, he's an attorney. He works with the NAACP. We're going to be sharing a lot of things with you this evening. Attorney Reide is going to share a plethora of things with you. However, we are going to not tarry and not waste a lot of your time, but I must give you a little information about Attorney Reide. He's a spirited civil rights activist with over 20 years of leadership experience with national and international nonprofit organizations, legislature, and advocacy campaigns. He's highly regarded as an educator and thought leader in criminal justice, race relations, and economic development, as demonstrated by stellar service as an NAACP Regional Director, the Director of Justice Initiatives for the State Bar of Michigan, adjunct professor, and head of law practice that helped win a police misconduct suit with a $1.5 million jury verdict. Wow, that's in the young people's vernacular, that's a lot of cheddar. So guys, listen, without further ado, let me just go back for 1/2 second here and just share with you. This gentleman is phenomenal. He's going to be talking with us about voter registration, voter rights. He's going to talk with us some about the Electoral College. But I would like to, as we introduce Dr. Reide, we also will be talking about the NAACP and its significance to the world. Dr. Reide, good afternoon and great to have you here, sir.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
Well, listen, Dr. Reide, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, sir.
Listen, we know that it was a challenge, and Murphy was doing his thing. I think we're all familiar with Murphy's Law, and he was doing his thing. But listen, we'll jump right in. We don't want to take a whole lot of your time. If you will, Dr. Reide, if you would share with our listening audience, some people have been asking me, since I'm a former NAACP president, and also I work with the Urban League as a director, and many times I have people asking me about the significance of the NAACP. If you would, will you share a little bit about the significance and the work of the NAACP for our listeners who may have those same questions?
Well, we have been for the last 110 years working to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights of everyone and to eliminate race-based discrimination. Our work is timely. Our work is very meaningful today because we live in a climate where there are people who are advocating racial hatred. They're using some of the bully pulpits in the highest offices in the land to advocate racial hatred. This is a challenge to the whole U.S. society. We have a situation where whole groups of people have been characterized as criminals, as invaders, as everything under the sun, when this is a country that is supposed to be built on the principles of out of many, one. So the diversity we have in this country is supposed to be our strength. We're supposed to live in a democracy, a country that operates on the rule of law and not on the rules of any person. We have some very specific areas that we're focusing on, but one of the things we want to do is start out right away discussing defeating hate by voting. On November 3rd, 2020, there will be a national presidential election, and we want to make sure that everybody's able to participate, that people are not being purged from the voter rolls, people are not being denied access to vote, people are not being given information. Okay, we want fair representation at all levels of the government, county, city, school board, state, congressional, and federal. And we want to protect democracy and enhance equity and increase the democratic participation and civic engagement of African Americans being elected to public office. So I will start right in with that. We need to not be confused between the popular vote and the Electoral College vote. The last presidential election was decided in the Electoral College, and everybody in every state needs to know who the electors are in your state and how are they governed. In other words, Do they have to vote for the candidate that gets the most votes, or is that vote divided? What is a faithless elector? What is a person who just doesn't vote any other way except what their conscience tells them to do? These are discussions, and this is information we need to get now. Okay, we have some 15 months between now and November 3rd, 2020, and we want to be laser focused on that and not sidetracked by anything else, because that is the priority. The other area that we work a lot in is public safety and criminal justice. We are appalled at the level of violence, hate crimes being committed in this country. We want to have public safety. We want people to be safe in their homes, safe in their schools, and everywhere else that they go. Synagogues, churches, mosques, temples, on their job. This is something we've been pushing for, and we want to encourage people to contact their congressional representatives, because there's been a number of pieces of legislation passed that are languishing in the United States Senate that would address some of these issues. And we're not speaking about it as one party or the other. We're speaking at a public policy that will save people's lives. And that's what we want to do now. We're also interested in criminal justice. We want to see an end to racially motivated policing strategies. We want to see an end to mandatory minimum sentences that tend to incarcerate African Americans to the extent that we now have a problem called mass incarceration, where there are more African Americans locked up in jail today than there were slaves in this country who were African American in 1853. And that is according to the author of the book, Mass Incarceration. Oh God, her name is escaping me right now. I can see her face. I can see the book. It'll come to me, but we've got to make sure that we focus on ending mass incarceration. We have places that are now going to legalize marijuana, for instance, and African Americans were disproportionately locked up during the so-called war on drugs. And Michelle Alexander is the author. Yes. And we're looking now at, well, are these people going to be able to get their records expunged? Because if they're able to have people go and buy that same amount of marijuana in a supermarket that this person is sitting in jail with a felony for, then we find that to be a contradiction. So some states like Illinois have an expungement policy. I know there are other states that are looking at it, but this is one of the things that we have to do, is examine what we have done and what the damage has done to our communities as a whole. And we want to make sure that incarceration is reduced, because we find that's not a solution to make our communities safer. Right. Some of the problems that people have can best be addressed in community-based programs. Sometimes people are in need of treatment. Sometimes people are in need of help, but usually they're in need of high school education and a job. Yes. Okay, these are things that, sometimes people don't want to talk about, but that is the real solution. If we have every child receive a free high quality education from pre-K through 12, we believe that we could reduce the prison population by more than half. Yes. And right now you have people working to dismantle public education. They want to privatize public education and have people going to school that are operated by companies that are motivated by profit and not motivated by giving our children the best education they can get. And I always ask the question, if we use the technology that we use, and all of us are walking around with smartphones in our pockets, how many of our children are learning to make those in the classroom? How many of our children are learning to fix those in the classroom? If you learn to make it or fix it in the classroom, then you might be being trained to become unemployed. If that's part of it, well, you're going to be standing on the sideline.
Yes.
We are concerned about health equality for all Americans. Some people question the relevancy of our organization, and I want to ask you, what is the relevancy of you being able to go to the doctor and afford it when you need to? Or go to
right.
and afford it when you need to.
Right.
We're about as relevant as a toothache.
right.
Now, there are people who have worked hard to try to repeal the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. There are people who have benefited from the Affordable Care Act. And when you ask them, well, what do you think about Obamacare? They say, oh, we don't like Obamacare, but we like the Affordable Care Act. They don't even know, because their ignorance of racism have blinded them to where they can't even see what's benefiting them and what's not. Okay. We will continue to press for high quality healthcare and a healthy lifestyle for everyone in the country. We also focus on economic sustainability. If you live in a city where it costs 2 times your salary to pay the rent, that means you living with somebody else.
Yes.
And there are a lot of cities now where rent is just outrageous, and working people cannot afford to pay the rent based on the salary they make. And when people press for $15 an hour as a minimum wage, some people think that's high or exorbitant. But when you do the math, what can they afford with less than $15 an hour? Now people are working 2 and 3 jobs and still not able to make ends meet. So that denies people the American dream. And that's something that we think everybody should have a chance to live in this country. We have the resources, we have the land, we have the technology. The question is, do we have the will, or are we too much focused on profit? Some people are more focused on profit than on people being able to sustain themselves and feed their families. Some people talk about things that are very confusing to me, like tariffs. But I know one thing: if I go in a certain big box department store and almost everything they sell is made from China, and you talk about raising tariffs, that means I'm gonna pay 25% more when I go in that store. You know them stores I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We don't want to be in a situation where people are working and they can't afford to pay rent, and they can't afford to feed their family, and they can't afford to put clothes on their back. So to us, these are the critical areas. And it means to us expanding the involvement of young people in every aspect of our organization. We are a vital organization. We have probably one of the largest participations of youth and college members and millennials than any other group in the country. And that is something that's been that way for a long time. We have several programs, one that many people are familiar with, which is called AXO, which is the Afro-Academic, Cultural, Technological, and Scientific Olympics of the Mind. We've had over 300,000 young people get scholarship money from competing for scholarships in our AXO program. Okay. We also train young people. We have young youth members of our National Board of Directors who are fully voting members with voice and vote. So we may be 110 years old, but we just as young and fresh as the young brothers and sisters you see out here every day. So we are looking to engage, train, and retain young adults. We actually have another program for the young people once they get past 25 years old, 26 years old, called Next Gen. The NAACP Next Gen, not to be confused with other people's Next Gen, but our Next Gen looks to train and groom the next generation of leaders, because we're going to persist, we're going to participate in this society fully as full citizens, and we will be heard.
Absolutely. You know, as you share those, all of those nuggets with us, Dr. Reide, will you touch a little bit more upon the Voter Rights Act? I didn't ask you specifically about that. Many times I'm in conversations with people, and I'll be very frank with you. I've said to many of our melanated brothers, I said, do you guys really understand what's happening? You know, when you're asking all of these little cute questions about the NAACP and whether they do. I said, do you understand that you have people fighting for you every day? It takes a simple signing of a pen where you no longer have any voting rights. You know, so will you touch on that just a little bit more about the Voter Rights Act
Some
as it is?
some of the protections that you had in the Voting Rights Act were gutted by a Supreme Court decision called Shelby. And in the Shelby case, states no longer had to get pre-clearance from the federal government when they started changing people's polling places.
Mm-hmm.
We have a situation where people, about a week or two before the election, they get something in the mail telling them their polling place is closed or moved. And they may have been voting in that same location for years, and now they're told they got to vote someplace else. Well, under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, that was the part that remains. You know, we could go to federal court and challenge that, but there was something called Section 5 that required states and municipalities to check with the federal government before they started playing games, before they were using strange voting machines. We had a city in Michigan that purchased all of the voting machines that they used in Florida. You know, the ones that gave you hanging chads and dimple chads and pregnant chads. They bought those machines up here to use in probably African American communities. So the Voting Rights Act was a way to protect us against that. Now, to restore those rights, a policy has been introduced by several legislators, and it is called the Voting Rights Advancement Act. And that would help restore some of the protections of the Voting Rights Act that we had. And we should make no bones about it. There are people who don't want to see folks voting in this country in general. They don't want to see specifically African Americans voting in this country. And they will go out of their way and do whatever they can to try to take that franchise from us. And we're just not having it. We're going to fight. We're going to be at the ballot box. We're going to cast that vote. And we want everyone within our listening and in our viewing to be out now registering people to vote over the next 15 months, to be educating people on these issues, to have them make a date for November 3rd, 2020. Tell them take the day off. Take it off now. Tell them you're sick. You're sick of you're sick of last night, first fired. You're sick of driving while black. Huh? You're sick of red. You're sick of gerrymander. The list just goes on. So
absolutely.
That's our significance. That's our story. We're sticking to
it. Well, you know, I am very, very definitely a part of the NAACP process. I'm a very strong believer. My wife and I both are life members. And as you share that, as I said, I don't want to keep you too long because you certainly have been very patient with us and you certainly have shared some information. You know, I know a lot of times when it gets close to voting, individuals have difficulty voting at precincts where they are actually on the roll. However, you know, little things come up at the last moment. What is that? Are there things at their disposal that they can do prior to the polls closing so that they can make a vote? I mean, obviously, I know if polls close at 8 o'clock and they get that 7, then it may be just a wrap. But if like their early part of the day or in the midday, do they have an outlet that they can maybe get some assistance?
Well, time for people to go to the county clerk's office, to the election commission's office, to go online and get this information. In some states, like here in Michigan, we have no reason absentee voting, which means you can vote early through the mail before election day.
Yes.
Okay. And I think in our last election, our last primary, we had almost 70% of the votes were cast through early voting. So that's something people should definitely take advantage of.
Absolutely.
They should learn as much about the voting process. One thing people can do, especially those that have college-age kids and they're getting ready to take them back to campus, get an absentee voter application from the clerk's office now so that that student can get an absentee ballot when they're away from home and be prepared to vote November 3rd, 2020. And that's the date everybody should mark on the calendar. Go there, write it down. Put it in your phone, November 3rd, 2020. That's 15 months from now. Put it in the refrigerator so you pass it every day, so you don't forget.
Absolutely.
To be at the polls. Now, there's going to be some elections this year in November, and those are important. There are several states. I know Kentucky is one that has a gubernatorial race. Those are very important races.
Louisiana as well.
In Indiana as well. But what we've got to do is make sure that we don't go to sleep and figure, oh, well, I don't have to think about that right now. Oh, yes, you do. Every time you hear something on the news, there's more madness, more of that stuff you hear every single day, the insults and the attacks on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and every other type of program, SNAP, food stamps. There's a concerted effort by right-wing forces that have got hold of the levers of government to undermine people and to take away a lot of the benefits and protections that folks have won over the years. And we want to get into it. So I hope this is helpful information to you. Everybody should go to NAACP.org, and we have a wealth of that is available 24 hours a day. NAACP is on Facebook, Instagram, any other social media platform you want to find. But, I want to thank you, Brother Lars, for this invitation, and I'm going to look forward to continuing this discussion with you in the future.
Well, look, Dr. Reide, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to share that with us, and we certainly look forward to keeping this conversation alive, keeping this conversation going. If someone would like to contact you, or I know you've given us the information to the NAACP.org, and or are you suggesting that would be the best route to take when they're seeking information?
We have information there on all of our departments, how to contact our different departments, how to file civil rights complaints online. That is the place.
All right. Well, listen, again, guys, we thank you for joining us. We thank Dr. Reide for being here with us. As I said, it was a major challenge behind the lines, guys. But listen, we want to invite you guys back to visit the Nobody Asked Me Guy show. As you guys know, we premiere each Friday night, 7:00 p.m. You know the type of guests we have. Begin next week. I don't know how many of you, as we talk about civil rights, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Overton family. We are interviewing Miss Chantel Overton. They are originally from Louisiana, Dr. Reide, and she has a massive story to tell about the Overton Empire that's also involved with Black Wall Street, etc. So we want to invite our guest back next week at 7:00 p.m. to the Nobody Asked Me Guy show. If you want to contact me, just go to www.dyingonmyfeet.com, where you'll find all my social media contacts. And last thing we'll say, again, for all of our mothers and sons out there, we implore you again, there's a book that's written by yours truly called Mothers and Their Men, an introspective look at mothers rearing their sons. You need to get that book. You get it from Barnes & Nobles, or just go to my website. So again, we want to thank Dr. Reide for being here. And this has been the Nobody Asked Me Guy show. You guys have a great, wonderful, and blessed night.
Thank you.